Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. You can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 156 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on myths about marriages. And this is the second time I'm recording it, so hopefully this will go a lot better than the first time. And it is the 16th of June 2022 as I record this, and today's episode is another myth-busting focused episode. So it actually turns out that this week is a myth-busting week. But this is still a really good, really fun podcast episode that is definitely worth listening to. And because this is a in-between episode, well, there is not a personal update or a psychology news section. But as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of romantic relationships, friendships, pro-social behaviour, and more, 3rd edition. And this is a really good sponsor for today's episode because not only is this book really fascinating and really easy to understand and definitely not like a boring textbook or whatsoever, but instead this book actually looks at the core things about relationships, for example, the biological, cognitive and social factors that helps to explain the different formations like why do relationships form in the first place. But then it also talks about communication and why your relationships are changing, and 2 things that are absolutely critical in any sort of relationships. So before moving on to stuff like pro-social behaviour, like bystanderism, and most importantly, how do we encourage pro-social behaviour. So it's filled with tons of fascinating topics that I cannot recommend enough. So that is Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of romantic relationships, friendships, and pro-social behaviour, and more, 3rd edition, available from all major ebook retailers. And you can get the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore and local library if you request it. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about myths about marriages, and of course, whilst nothing on the podcast is ever official advice, even relationship advice, I still want to do today's episode to help us face up to some of these myths in the present, in the future. We should have the same interests. I've always had 2 thoughts about this myth, because on the one hand, it's nice to have things in common, so that you and your partner can do enjoyable things together. On the flip side, if you both have the exact same interest and you don't have anything that's yours, so to speak, then you could have its own negative effects on the relationship, because you feel like you're being smothered. So whatever you believe, it's important that both of you connect and have things to bond over. These same interests don't have to be big things. It can be as simple as you were going out for a walk at night and both being interested in books and talking about them. As long as you're connected, then that's fine. And often the simplest things are the best because you can both do these at any time. We shouldn't fight. I mean, like, seriously. So I've spoken about my own thoughts about conflict in relationships and their occasional benefits on the podcast before. But another way to imagine it is that it would be an extremely boring marriage if you were married a clone of yourself that didn't disagree with you once. It's good to meet people more with different opinions and attitudes, and it allows you to get outside of an echo chamber. We have to agree on politics and religion. This is exactly as the same point above. Not only are you 2 different people, but it might help you develop and deepen your own understanding on these issues if you hear them from a different viewpoint. Therefore, it doesn't make you messed up or a couple with serious problems if you disagree on these massive issues. It makes you normal, and that's the critical thing that you've got to remember. If things get bad, we're doomed. Personally, I really had to think about this one because I couldn't believe that people believed it strongly, but it turned out that I was coming at the myth from a different angle. It turns out that when things have been bad for a while, couples tend to believe that they're stuck, and this is how it's going to be forever. Their partner won't change their behaviour and their marriage is doomed to fail because the problems won't fix itself. Granted, nothing ever fixes itself, but the reason why this is a myth is because this requires communication. And I know that I've done podcast episodes on that communication before, and it's important. So what you might want to check out the about list. But it's important for couples to talk about their problems and actively seek out a solution. For example, some people recommend couples therapy, reading a marital self-help book, and more. Even if you both agree to spend half an hour a night together each night or with each other and no technology around, even if that's not enough, it shows that you're both trying and the marriage might not be doomed. It shouldn't be hard to feel close. So I left this myth till last because I really do understand it and it makes a perfect sense. Since you will believe that you should always feel close to your partner, even after years of living together. Well, the truth is that humans are creatures of a behavioural habit and a comfort. Meaning, you and your partner are living together and as you're married, you're going to get into a routine and form your own behavioural habits. Therefore, whilst you both might be there physically together, you might not feel too close because you're doing what you're always doing. Therefore, there's nothing special about it. Consequently, marriage will require a bit of extra effort sometimes, so that you both feel close to each other. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you got some out of it. I know that I definitely enjoyed these sort of myth busting, but also with these relationship podcast episodes because they really do help us to learn a lot, not only about ourselves, but we can also apply them to our relationships. So that is very, very important. And if you know someone who enjoyed today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the words about the podcast. And definitely check out The Psychology of Relationships, The Social Psychology of Romantic Relationships, Friendships, First Social Behavior, and more, a third edition. But if you didn't want to buy a book, be still willing to give the podcast a bit of one-at-a-time support, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Con Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.